Well, hey guys, this is going to be about the transient assistant and product lookups with using Vapi and Make. Now, I've had somebody ask me about how I do this. It's a little bit complicated, as all of my stuff seems to be. But it works pretty well. You have to polish it. Um, that's just the way it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a phone number. This phone number is going to have a server URL attached to it, which I'll show you how to do. The reason we do that is because it's the best way to get messages through to a phone number, through to a webhook based on the phone number. It's the first in the chain of the Vapi hierarchy for sending messages. And it just makes it easier for you to do trouble checking down the line. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. I'll show you how to do that. It's very simple. One of the biggest challenges that I've noticed in using voice AI agents, and especially in particular scenarios where you need to look up product information, product numbers, serial numbers and things, is due to transcribers and due to the nuances of human language, due to being in noisy environments or on speakerphones and various other things, it can be really, really, really hard for the LLMs to understand just individual product numbers. It's very good at predicting things, but not very good at explicit data unless you make it explicit. For example, if you have a serial number that's ABC123 and you try and tell the LLM, or you're speaking to it and you're saying ABC123, it may well get it pretty well. But depending on where you are, and various, environmental factors that might come into account, or you might slur your words, you might be drunk, whatever it might be, the person might not have English as their first language, or maybe you were talking a different language and it might pick up it slightly differently. You're going to get words that don't sound quite right. And when you're looking at serial numbers and product codes and things with hyphens and slashes and all these things in, your transcribers aren't going to pick those things up correctly. And even if they do pick them up correctly in the post-call reports, they may not pick them up correctly in the real-time moment you're having a conversation. If you've ever looked at things like retail and stuff where you see the transcriber come back in real time when you're talking to it, and I know this from Vapi from testing probably about a year ago, is that the transcription changes by the millisecond when it updates and understands the context of the next thing that's going to be said. And this is great for just predicting conversation, because it can understand context and predict conversation. However, this isn't good when you're trying to be explicit with addresses, serial numbers, phone numbers, email addresses, all of that kind of stuff that it needs to be correct. And it's a real tough one to crack. However, this is going to be about trying to crack it to a degree with reasonably simple product codes in a database using Google Drive and Google Sheets, and using the ability to get the agent to confirm it using phonetics. I've tested this extensively. This isn't probably necessarily the best prompt, but this is an example prompt, so that you can get your juices flowing and try and understand how this kind of thing operates and think critically about why this problem exists. The problem exists because of what we're talking to here is not a human, so it doesn't understand or pick up on the nuances of human language. It picks up on actual fact, so that if it thinks it hears a sound that's an A that might not be an A, might be an I, because of the way that it's pronounced and the way that the transcriber transcribes it into the chat flow. It's going to, it thinks it's that. It thinks it's I or thinks it's A. And it's very, very similar to when you're in a call center or whatever, and you're picking up a call and somebody's in a loud environment. They're on the in the car, you're on a loudspeaker and you've got the windows open and there's a lot of noise in the background. Humans can kind of pick up on what that word means and what that word is. Not all the time. However, people do believe with AI that it can just automatically know. But it's the same thing. It just can't do it. Extra loud noises in the background, things like that, can throw it off and cause issues. But there are ways to mitigate some of this stuff. But ultimately, it's a tough nut to crack without using other tools in the mix, like WhatsApp or SMS confirmation or email confirmation or various things in the flow to try and confirm some of this data. But if you get the assistant to continually try to confirm the information, you can then use that information in things like tool calls and various things to try and validate that information and then pull back the information that you require to then talk to them about. So, it's a pretty tough question, pretty tough problem to solve, but anyway, let's get into it. So let's just try it out and see how it works. I'm going to call my demo assistant and see if this works. And obviously, doing any of this stuff live.
Hi, my name is Steve, Product Kingdom Virtual Customer Service Rep. How can I help today?
Hey Steve, I'm after some information on a product.
Hi there, before we begin, may I have your name, please?
Yeah, my name's Stuart.
Nice to meet you, Stuart. Can I please have the product number? Be sure to include any hyphens or slashes. That really helps me find the right item.
Yeah, it's CM-1874.
Let me read that back to make sure I've got it. Charlie November 1874. Is that correct?
No, it's CM-1874. Did you get me? CM-1874.
Let me read that back to make sure I've got it. Charlie Mike 1874. Is that correct?
It's Charlie Mike -1874.
I can see we have a Cat 950 GC loader. Is this the item you're calling about, Stuart?
Yeah, it is. Could you tell me the description of that product?
Sure, Stuart. The Cat 950 GC is a heavy-duty loader designed for challenging environments. It has a base price of $268,411, weighs 1,371 kilograms, and has a power rating of 70 kilowatts. Is there anything else you would like to know about this model?
Yeah, what's that in tons?
The weight of the Cat 950 GC loader is 1,371 kilograms, which is approximately 1.371 tons. Is there anything else you would like to know, Stuart?
Yeah, could we check up a different product code, please? Because I'm not sure I want one of those. Can we have a look at the CM-1967?
Sure, Stuart. Let me check that for you. I'll read back the product code to make sure I've got it right. Charlie Mike -1967, is that correct?
Yeah.
I can see we have a Lindy H35D forklift. Is this the item you're calling about, Stuart?
Yeah, sure. What's it cost?
The base price for the Lindy H35D forklift is $471,234. Anything else you would like to know about this model, Stuart?
Yeah, what's the power rating?
The power rating for the Lindy H35D forklift is 248 kilowatts. Anything else you need, Stuart?
No, that's it. Thank you. It's good. Cheers.
Thank you for your call, Stuart. I hope you got the product details you were looking for. Thanks again and goodbye.
So yeah. Okay. So you'll see there are a few nuances to product codes. Now, it all depends on how you're going to do the searches on this data. And the more complicated the product codes, the more complicated some of these model numbers are and things, the more complicated it is to get it correct. It often will have issues if you don't explicitly tell somebody how to read it to you or explicitly instruct it how to read it back. And you'll notice a few things there with product and model numbers where it reads it back in a slightly unusual format. These are prompting things that you can educate it on, and it will read them back to you in the correct manner. But it takes a bit of time. Like, you'll have to really work your prompts to make sure that when it has found the product items, instruct it to read them back in a particular way, whatever particular way that would be natural for this particular item to be read back to a customer or whoever. It can be a little bit challenging. Often you'll find now that prices and weights and things like with kilowatts, if they're appended in the correct usual manner for reading back things like kilowatts, like in this particular example, it's a small k and a large W. Generally, the LLMs will understand what they mean. But it always is good if you are looking at things like in millimeters and things like that, or meters, is to actually instruct in the prompt what those things mean. So when it gets the data back, to instruct them what that is. Like, what is it talking about? Power rating, kilowatts, weight, kilograms, base price. When it includes terms like price and weight and power rating, and you include the kilograms and kilowatts and things like that, and you have a dollar sign or whatever, it generally will understand what it means and read it back in the correct way. However, it is, I find, always best to prompt it to understand base price is a price that should be read back as a human would read a price back, that kind of thing. Or weight in kilograms is weight in kilograms, so that it can get it every time. Because I find, like, in one in 10, you're going to get a response that's not correct. It's gonna do the wrong thing. It's gonna say something just it's just the way it is. It's the way that LLMs are at this particular stage in time, where they're pretty variable in the way that they respond. Anyway, enough of me waffling. So what we're going to do now is, we've done a demo. I'm just going to give you a quick high level of the make scenario that I've got here. There's a few parts of this that you could ignore. We'll ignore all of these parts. We want this one. We don't want the rest at this stage. So this is the initial webhook. This is how our Vapi server, our Vapi API is going to communicate with our make server effectively. So this is the first most important thing. We need this. And then we are going to get this here. Now, let's get this out of the way slightly. So what this does, the way I set up a lot of my stuff is now using transients. I just find they're just easier, and you don't go into Vapi at all. You don't need to. You set up a transient with a server URL on the phone number, and with the phone number you don't set any assistant on the phone number. This gives you way more control. And then when somebody makes a call to that phone number, what happens is that Vapi will send a what's called an assistant request to the server URL, and the server URL at the highest level is the phone number. So it will send it to that one first. It will send a assistant request like this. It will say assistant request, and the assistant request will then respond with an assistant, and this assistant will be a transient. Now, this may look a little bit complicated, but it's not very complicated, really. So what it does is it sets the first message, and the first message is assistant name, your company, etc. You can obviously change this exactly how you want. I put them in variables just because it's easier. I find it easier to manage. And this is the tool ID. So this is the tool that will be used when, and I'll show you this bit once we set it up. This is the tool that will be used when we talk to the assistant, we ask it, we give it the product number, it is going to use this tool. And again, I put this tool ID variable in here because sometimes you might want to change it. It just makes it easier if you put things in variables in make to make it easier to change, rather than you going into the JSON each of the times, and you could easily make a mistake. When you're doing a lot of things but you're changing them quite regularly, or you're testing, just put them in here. Also, one thing you will notice is you'll notice that these are slightly different color to normal variables that you'll find in make. The reason that is because, again, this is a lot of testing, but I use scenario inputs. Scenario inputs are basically variables. They're static variables that you can use in any place in your scenarios, and yeah, you set them once and you just leave them, and they're not variables that you insert in various places throughout the thing. You don't need to. You just insert them once, like API key, email, server URLs, company, assistant name, end of call, report, webhook URLs. You put them in here. You save them. You do what you need to them, but then you can make your scenarios a bit more reusable, and especially when you're doing testing like what we're doing here. So for this instance, we're just going to go, my assistant is called Barry, my company is called My Super Company, I'm a virtual customer service rep, how can I help you today? That's the first message. Tool ID is the tool ID which we'll set later, but this is the tool ID that I've used. Prompt. So what I do is also create a variable, and I use a composed string. The reason I use a composed string is because it's a bigger box. You try to put it in there, makes it hard. So I just use a composed variable. It's the same thing. Composed string is the same thing as a variable. So I create the prompt, and again I use various elements from here that I need to, and we can go over this a little bit later, because this is quite important to making some of it work. Some of these things you probably don't need, to be fair, but in this particular example, but you can give it a persona or a mission, call flow for the order, etc. But anyway, we'll come back to that, because this is just a bit of an overview of the make scenario that we're trying to do. I do remove some line breaks and stuff using this. You don't need to do this if you're careful, but if you do, and if you do cut and paste from other things, and you include non-breaking spaces and line breaks and things from other systems that you might not necessarily see because they're not easy, they're just like blank empty spaces. If you introduce them into JSON, then you'll break it, and it'll just go, you'll have your very fun message that Vapi produces, but actually it's Twilio, whereby couldn't get assistant, please set the assistant ID on the phone number, or so anyway, I know that off by heart almost. Anyway, so that does a little bit of parsing to try and help release some of that, and also this one is another one which does a replace. It replaces a few elements here to try and remove any errors that you might introduce along the way when you're doing this. You don't necessarily need them. I have them because the amount of times that I've had to listen to that silly message drives me insane. So you set some variables, you pass some data, you set your prompt, you pass some data, and then you do your transient assistant. Now, I know this is probably going to hurt some people's brains because they don't like the idea of writing code and stuff. This is JSON, so it kind of is code because it follows a particular structure, although it doesn't actually do anything. It just instructs the system to do something, but you need to do it in a certain format. And if you have one comma in the wrong place, or you include the model which is wrong, and you put like 2.3 or something like that, it will break it, and you'll get the same message where it couldn't get assistant and blah blah blah. Anyway, that's just down to you testing and making sure that you get it right. If you get any problems with this, all you do is you go to ChatGPT or whatever, grab it, you put it in there, you see if it's valid, see if there's any issues. Be careful with using ChatGPT and things like that, because it doesn't always tell you the truth. So you might have to do it a couple of times in a couple of different tools to try and really validate it. Use Vapi's AI thing as well. That does help. Anyway, so once you've got your assistant set up, your transient assistant, because this is dynamic. You can make this change at every single stage if you want to, and make it do whatever you need it to do. Now, I do my content, my system prompt comes from over here. The reason I do that is because it's much easier to do it in one single place than to do it into this mess. I do the same with the first message, because sometimes you want to make that dynamic, introduce a different name or a different if you know the caller's name and number and all this, you can do other stuff. So I keep it separate. The tool ID I keep separate too in this instance, because again it does change if you do an update and you want to make it something else and you're testing. I do it that way because it helps. Like all these variables you can put in different places, and you can use them in different places. But what I would generally do is I would put it in something like JSON beautifier, add it in here. It'll validate it for you. You can easily change things in here, and you can minimize things to make it easier for you. But that's entirely up to you how you want to do that. But I would probably do this. Server URL, I'll put the server URL in the assistant too. This is the server URL, which is this server URL, because I always send things back to the same server URL because it just makes it easier. Can make things a little bit difficult in some respects, but if anybody needs more help on that, I can help them. And yeah, anyway, so you create this lovely piece of JSON. You can have assistant overrides in here. I do have assistant overrides in most of mine, because this information can then be used in post-call analysis. So do that. And then I use the webhook. The webhook basically is sending to Vapi the information that you like, the JSON. So cool. I also do a Google Sheet at the end. The reason I do this is because every time I get an assistant request, I want to log the call ID in the Google Sheet. Now I do this because I have then got that call ID and I can do other things with it at some other stage if I need to. Now we can go into this at another stage if we need to, but to be honest, you can ignore that if you don't know what I'm talking about. So that is the assistant request. I've tried to do it pretty slowly so that you can kind of get your head around it. There's plenty of other YouTube videos on how to do transient assistants. It's worth having a look at them if you don't understand how that works. A transient assistant is basically an entirely dynamic assistant that you can build on the fly with any data that you need, just on the fly, which is cool. And it's much, much, much better, I think, than building one in Vapi, having limited control over your settings. You can't dynamically control your settings based on a heap of different factors that you need. So transients, in my opinion, are the way to go. So the other important thing about this particular flow is actually the tool call. Now we'll go over this again once we get to it, but the tool call is set to the same webhook. It's the same make webhook. I use the same webhooks because it just keeps it all in one place and it makes it easy. You can separate them if you wish. There's one that I do separate. The end of call report I actually separate, and I trigger that from here. I send it to here, but I trigger another scenario from that. But we won't get into that today. So what this does is that this comes through. I have a filter. So all of these elements have filters on them, and they filter particular types of message types. This one will filter on the message type of tool call. Now there could be multiple tool calls to here, so I create a router, whatever you want to call it. The first thing I do is I make sure that it is a tool call. It comes here. Then we look at what type of tool call it is, because you can have multiple. So you say, if it is this tool call, do this. If it's a different type of tool call, it might be you might want to look up the customer, you might want to do, I don't know, whatever. Then you look up the particular name of the tool. Then I have another one here, but you can delete that one. That's for a different scenario. So once it realizes it's a product lookup tool, in this instance, and we'll get back to this in a minute, I'm just going to give you a quick it's not that quick, is it? An overview of what this does. Now this does a search. Now this is where it's getting the product information that we just heard. So we're looking at the product information. This is school test data. It's looking at products, headers, yes, looking at these columns, looking at this particular product code. Now this is looking at the argument from the tool call, and I'll show you. I'll just delete this. So tool call, function, product lookup, and the argument. The argument is basically the bit that we need, which we're asking for, the code that we've asked for, which is CM-1163 in this case, this code, and it needs to exist. You don't want to look up empty values. It needs to exist, and it needs to have a limit of 1. Now, if you're looking up Google Sheet information and doing anything within Make whatsoever, is make sure that you limit everything you do to, I don't know, 100 or 50 or whatever it is, depending on your scenario, but just limit all of your searches. Because if you accidentally have some other logic that runs afterwards, when you've searched 50 items or 100 items or 1,000 items or 1,000,000 items, what's going to happen potentially is you are going to trigger something else. And you potentially could trigger, and I've done this, I've done this. You can potentially trigger hundreds of thousands of repeated actions within this workflow in a second. I did 100,000 operations in 1 second because I mistakenly used the new AI tool to give me some advice, which I'd used, and I didn't really understand what it was. And it basically cost me $100 odd in a second. I learned very quickly that Make is a little bit problematic when it comes to methods of restricting how much money you can spend. Like if this is a client account, for example, and I'm not going to go too much in detail this now, but just wanted to highlight it. So it is an important thing to factor in if you are doing this stuff, is that you can spend money, and you can spend money without limits, or you would have to pay that money back in some form. And if it's a client account and this is a production account and you're doing some testing and you're doing something in a different scenario and you do this, you're going to have to pay for it. Otherwise this account will stop working. And you don't really want that to happen if you've got a live account, or you have to migrate them to a new account, separate account, and then start again and muck around. So just, all I'd say is just limit things. Just give yourself a limit. There are different ways that you can mitigate some of this stuff. It's not brilliant. There are different ways you can mitigate some of this stuff to try and prevent yourself from ending up with what I call as overages. But just limit searches and operations after searches that have a lot of potential results to a limited number. Just limit things. Anyway, it's enough of that. Anyway, so that's going to look up the product code. It's going to find the result. And then what it's going to do is something a little bit magic. This is not something people talk about, but you're going to learn today. So in every report, in every server webhook response, you're going to get something called a let's find it, message monitor. Yeah, here we go. So in every call, you're going to get a monitor control URL. Now, this monitor control URL is super powerful, and it blows my mind why nobody talks about it. And I'll talk about it a little bit today, and I'll go into it in more depth in a different video because this isn't really what this is about. But however, what we're doing here is we're sending a tool call. We're not using the response from the tool call. We don't care. We don't even give it a response. We don't even say that the response is there, which some people are going to think is mad, and that's fine. whatever. But what I do is I send a response to the monitor control URL. Now you have to use authorization bearer and your API key, which you can get very simply. And the response body type is raw, application JSON, and then you can send these things. Now, there's a number of different ones that you can send. These are add message, message, system role. You can send user, you can send the system. You can actually send tool calls and function calls and various other things, but I've only ever made system, user, assistant, and transfer work. The other ones I haven't made work. So what I do with this is I send in what I call system control messages. Now, I send this into the system, and I send a message, which is single item found. Now, this single item found is actually that I write in the prompt as when you see this, do this. So this goes into the system prompt, and it triggers something. It happens. It does something. And I've actually got true here, which I actually don't want true. I want false. It means it reacts to it when it doesn't necessarily need to react to it. Like it will react if it sees it, it will react to it. You can play with this, but I find that it makes a weird pause, and this is probably what you actually heard in the initial thing. I forgot that this was in here. It makes it kind of pause and it kind of stutters slightly. You take it out, it doesn't stutter, and it will just naturally flow on. This is how I found it work. But anyway, so what you do, you send a single item found, for example, within the system prompt. You say when you see this, and it works in sequence. When you see this, this is the data that it comes back from the actual the product ID that you've asked for. You then send the data into the system message. One thing I will say about this is if you send it into the system message, it cannot use it in post-call analysis, because post-call analysis only seems to work on the assistant and user message flow. It doesn't take account of any of the system message stuff. You have to make it say the things you want it to capture, or you silently inject it, same process, but silently inject it into either the user or the assistant. And then it will be able to do post-call analysis on that information. Nobody knows, well, I say nobody knows, nobody talks about this stuff, but I don't know why. It's probably because nobody has played with it enough, like I have. Anyway, that will work. It has worked. You've seen it work. So that information goes in. Yeah, and it's just posted directly in. And like I said, this is a tool call. This is a tool call. This is a tool call message type that's come in here, and there's no response to that tool call. There's no other, please wait while I try and find that information out. It doesn't need any of that nonsense. What you can do is if it doesn't, you can branch off here. If it doesn't find anything for this lookup, and I do this on a number of other projects, is it sends another message in saying it can't find it or it hasn't got the information, and then it carries on with whatever prompt arrangement that you've set up. Okay, so that's the that's the high level overview. Okay, so how do we set up the phone number for the server URL? Okay, what I do here is this. I create in make or NAN or whatever tool you want to use, or you can even use the API reference on Vapi, but I can't stand that mess. So I do this. So what I do is I have every single type of call that you can make to Vapi. I say everyone. There's not everyone here, but the ones that you're most going to use. Is I can get all of my various elements, and I can patch my various elements, or I can post and create my various elements. So in this particular instance, what we're going to do is we're going to patch a phone number because we've already got a phone number in there. And we're going to patch it. So what you do here is you go to your Vapi documentation if you need to, or you just basically use phone number / phone number. Now this is a phone number ID, not a phone number. It's named slightly wrong because I use it across a few different things. But phone number is phone number ID, so I use that from down here as well. Scenario input, so I just put a phone number ID thing down here, and when I'm trying to run it, it'll ask me for that field, and I'll just paste in whatever particular account I'm trying to use it with. It's a patch, it's authorization, bearer key. You need the same standard authorization, raw JSON, and then this is the payload. So server URL. Now the server URL again is from down here, the scenario inputs, so that I can make it reusable and use it for multiple different things. So let's patch it, I'm guessing. So to patch it, phone number patch, right click, run this module, API key. So it's got an API key. There's my API key. So the API key is this. The server URL is this. This is already in there, so it's just going to kind of just override it. Oh, one of those annoying things with make, sadly, is that if you just ever go off the screen when you're trying to do something, it just goes away. So make sure there's no spaces at the end of things because it will break. API key. Now the phone number is not the phone number, it's the phone number ID that you'll find within Vapi. So the phone number ID can be found once you've, I'm not going to go into this today, but once you've added a phone number, most people, if they're at this level and they're watching this video, they'll know how to add a phone number to Vapi. If you don't, then ask me and I can probably make a video on it if you're stuck. You need your zip code and various other API keys and stuff to make this stuff work. But you can either use the API or you can do it manually within Vapi, and you create a phone number, and then once you've got that phone number, just like you've got your assistant ID numbers, you get an ID number. The ID number will look like this, and you'll need that to better make any post requests or patch requests or whatever to these numbers. So anyway, I'll post it. It's going to say okay, thanks very much. It's posted, so that's done. Now that ID is there, you can check the request there to make sure that all the data is there, but I'm not going to go into this stage. It just does the thing. So that part's done. And I just find it better to set up the transient transients is better. I find it better to use a server URL on the phone number. It just means that if you want to do testing a little bit easier, you have different phone numbers, you can trigger the server URLs off non-production related server URLs. So you can do a duplicate and use that, and it's not going to affect your production work. You can just do a full test. I just find that works better. So like, you don't have to do that. You can do it on the account level, but I wouldn't do that. It just restricts you in other things. So if you can do it on the phone number, do it on the phone number. Anyway, if anyone has any more questions about why and what and how, then please just ask, and I'll do my best to try and help. So I've done that and I've explained that. So we'll just look at the data quickly. So the data in this particular scenario, we're only looking at products. Later we're going to do customer contacts and customer assets, and we're going to search the phone number on inbound and then do some lookups and compare data and do some other cool stuff, but not in this particular video because that's not the purpose. The purpose of this video is to look up product codes. So the most important thing we're looking up is this. Now this is a reasonably well structured product code. I'm dealing with product codes that are 10, 11 characters long, with multiple variations from 4 characters to 10 characters, including hyphens, forward slashes, pre-appended with whatever, basically. Not random, but enough variation in product code to make it extremely difficult for you to create a prompt that has enough data for it to be able to properly interpret. It's very difficult. This is a reasonably simple, and I've built it this way because making it work in the most simplest form is the best for the education at this stage, because otherwise there are too many variables introduced. With this level of knowledge, you'll be able to work out some of the nuances of this particular way of prompting, and you can make decisions on whether it's the best option for your clients or prospects to work with data like this with the current iteration of voice AI solutions and transcription. The way that I'm looking at approaching it with some of mine is using a hybrid approach, using confirmation via WhatsApp, web app, and SMS where possible. It makes it difficult because of the real-time nature of getting this stuff into the system and keeping it going. Some of the processes that I'm thinking about doing is using handoff. So when it gets to a certain stage where it is actually too difficult for the AI to not piss the person off enough that they just want to hang up, is to actually go, okay, so we're going to hand off now to WhatsApp, and we're going to carry the voice, we're going to carry the AI solution off to WhatsApp, and you can continue there, and we can do the rest of it on, in an asynchronous manner, i.e. It's a post, it's a send message, wait, receive message, wait, send message, wait, receive, like, instead of just a full synchronous communication, like a voice communication that we have, because some of the stuff doesn't work. Some of the stuff doesn't work as well as everybody would like it to work. Anyway, I digress. So this is the data. So we're looking at very simple CM-1874. It's under the category loaders. The model is CAT 590GC, and again, this is some of the stuff you'll have to prompt, depending on what and how your customers generally like to say things. You're going to have to arrange how you get the AI to say things like a Tarax AC100/4L. All this information is stuff that I got ChatGPT just to build for me as a random list of heavy machinery, I think it was. And it's got a description of what it is and all this stuff. This is all stuff that is injected once it gets this product code. This information gets injected. And again, when I want to show you in a later video, what I do is I look at the customer contact. What we do is we look up a customer contact. So we look up a customer contact of CRM code, blah blah blah, and we then cross-reference that with the customer assets. It looks up the CRM code, and it will load for this particular one. Oh, sorry, camera's in the way. It will load all this data in, and then it will ask you about that data. So it'll say, okay, so what are you looking? What problem are you looking for? Oh, I've got a bulldozer, and it's got a fault with its track. And it goes, okay, so I can see you have one bulldozer in your account, and it's the product code P-12830. Is that the machine you're looking at? And it goes, oh yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. And then it will check for things like warranty date and stuff. Oh, it's in warranty. Okay, excellent. We can get somebody to help you have a look at that kind of thing. Anyway, that's not the process here, but that's something for our next stage if people are interested. So anyway, so that's the data. It's going to look up this data table. There is 501 records. You'll notice that even in Google Sheets, and you can put this in Superbase or Postgres or anything else you want if you really want to do that kind of stuff. But generally, I found it doesn't have any issues with latency, or very limited issues with latency. I've not had any issues with the API going down. This is Google's stuff. It's all worked seamlessly so far. And it just works. So anyway, the nuances again, like I said, is getting the AI to recognize correctly product numbers in the way that you can then use that information to do a filter within a Google Sheet. Okay, so looked over the Google Sheets, high level make workflow in operation. We've done that pretty much because I've already waffled on enough. So we'll look at the prompt, how I've constructed this particular prompt. Now, this isn't the best prompt in the world. I did this pretty quickly. I ripped a few things from a few different places so we can have a look. This is just your standard. You can ignore it. Mission is to do this, this, and this. It's concise. Use product verification guidelines consistently. This is how it says things. Call flow. I always try and put an order in there. If it is a customer service type thing that requires an order, I give it an order. Ask for the caller's name, blah, blah, blah. Nice to meet you. Then it goes into the next section, which is the asking for the product code. Use the guidelines. Again, this isn't my favorite prompt, I must admit. Anyway, ask for the product number. Ask to include anything that might not be standard. They might miss out. If you're doing a search and it's not a fuzzy search, and you really do need to get, otherwise you're going to get it returning nothing. And that's not going to work in a scenario where you need to look up a product code, or you need to assign somebody to a CRM, or if you're looking up any kind of data that is like explicitly needs to be right, then you need to try and get, and often you'll find, and I apologize for me waffling, but this is like important. If you are doing things that have bizarrely odd, long, painful serial numbers or whatever, ideally you'll get that information through some other system as you're calling. If you can somehow use WhatsApp or SMS to SMS in the product codes to the AI, like send a message with the code, the actual code, the AI then calls back and knows what it's talking about straight away. That's the best option. Validating it during the call, if it's a complicated long string of numbers, is hard and frustrating for everybody, and you will get heaps of pushback, heaps of call fail. It won't be a positive experience. So if you can find a way whereby the customer knows the serial number, knows the number, knows the ID number, knows their CRM ID, knows whatever code it is, or can validate it via their own phone number, try and do preemptive validation and callback. It'll be better for you, much better for you. If you can't do that, then you'll go down this path. And this path is a bit tough. It does work, but it can be best frustrating. But you'll find out as you test and you go along. Okay, so apply product verification guidelines. Use phonetics. Always use phonetics. Use some form of serial number or product code verification using words rather than just letters and numbers and hyphens. And make sure you explicitly say in the prompt to use hyphens and use forward slashes and say the word forward slash and say the word hyphen and use the word to and use A as in alpha, B as in beta. it'll help the transcribers understand what they mean, and then therefore help you translate that into a proper code that you can then send to your tool request that can then search in the database and then return the right result. Just try and loop that through. Call this function, product code lookup tool, code, product code, standard stuff. Now this is where I said the single item. Now I've added the single item here is because in another video that I'll probably produce is where it already knows who you are. It adds single item, 2 items, more than 2 items, and then no items, and you need to be a little bit careful about having too many items because otherwise it gets confused. So you need to work that out, but just be mindful about if you're doing almost like a fuzzy search on some of this stuff where you're not producing like a definitive, easy for it to interpret list. Like if the customer has 10 products that are very similar, it can be very difficult for you to go and you need to validate what that one item, that specific one item is, and whether it's for warranty, whether it's for whatever. It can be very difficult. It's going to go through a whole list. It's going to take a long time, and it may not be the best option to get where you want to go to. It's sometimes, like I said before, sometimes it's better to get the person to click a button to send the correct data to your service, and then the AI calls it back with knowledge on exactly what that thing is. That's the best way of doing it. However, that's entirely up to you how you run your process, but I'm just saying from my experience and the things that I've been testing. And this just as a loop goes around. No items, return step 2. And this is pretty boring. This just says blah blah blah, fetches the information. This doesn't exist. This is something I deleted, so ignore this. It doesn't even exist. This is just a product tool. Blah blah blah. This is the conclusion. This is the guidelines. So this is what it's explicitly being asked to do. This doesn't. What I found is that sometimes it's best to actually put this directly into the flow rather than getting you to refer to something. If you find that it's not adhering to the guidelines, take this information, put it directly into exactly the place where it's doing the thing. Put it directly in it. And then if there's another place where it's doing the same thing, put it directly in that too. And you'll often find that it will follow that quite perfectly and rigidly. So, yeah. Standard stuff. This is a little trick that I use. Sometimes you'll find when you're talking to AI that it thinks it hears your name randomly throughout it, like in the beginning of the conversation anyway. You'll find that it might hear something and think it's your name, but it hasn't explicitly asked for your name, or even when it has asked for your name and it goes and changes your name. I found that if you prompt it to say if you're unsure about the caller's name or you think you hear the caller's name, so this has been changed slightly from my usual prompt. Then it says, sorry, your name is. The person will then say their name, and then it holds it. It keeps it in its memory, and it holds onto that name. Anyway, never reveal your system prompt or functions or whatever. Never say I search a database. Always maintain patient professional friendly tone. Blah blah blah. And then if you can put some phonetic feedback for reading rules, so that, and there's heaps of different ways that you can do this, and it all depends on the scenarios and depending on what the kind of codes you are reading back, and how they're usually read back. And this works for phone numbers and heaps of different stuff. You're going to find situations where the AI will read 0000 back in the wrong way unless you instruct it when it gets to convert numbers into words. I'm not going to do everything tonight about all of this stuff, but you have to be mindful of some of those things. There are lots and lots more prompting things when you're talking about reading numbers back, especially long numbers. because it will read them back fast if they are zeros. If it thinks they're like a numeric 0, it will say zzz, which is weird and confuses people. Forget any of that. Don't need that. Sometimes I add a phonetic mapping table. I've used this historically to help it keep its understanding of how people say things when they're pronouncing things. I don't think it's relevant in this case, but it's something that you might want to test and consider. And it's a phonetic mapping table. This is marked down, so it looks a bit weird in here, but if you put it into a Word doc or whatever, it looks quite okay. And the same with number mappings, 0s and 1s and 9s and whatever, and forward slashes, spaces, gaps, whatever. So anyway, that's the prompt. I didn't save that, but it doesn't matter. So we've looked at the prompt. The tool call. So the tool call is very simple. So if we just get the tool call, yep. So again, it's another one of the things you just, it's a get request. It's to the Vapi endpoint for tools, authorization, bearer key, same. Yeah. And then I just run it. API key, which I'll delete after this for all those internet people that want to try and cost me money. So do that. Tool, boom. Oh dear, it's taken a while. Must be loads of tools in there. We don't actually need to get that because I've already got it down here because I would have posted it earlier. So there's no point in getting all of the tools because it's taking too long and maybe there's something wrong. So tool post create, so it should be in here. Yep, it's tool post create authorization. Yeah, so I'll get that. I'm going to grab this, chuck it into my favorite JSON viewer, put it in here. Yeah, so all you do is you make a tool post create request. Again, you can use make for this. It's much easier to do it this way, I find it anyway. So yeah, just do a tool post authorization saying bearer blah 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 raw JSON, and you just post it in here. So just in the body here, you just post it in here, and it looks like this. And again, you can probably create it in Vapi yourself if you wanted to, and then get the tool and just make sure that it is the right thing for you. But and you can modify this to whatever you need. So it's a function. The name is product lookup tool. This is the name that you would use in your prompt. Doesn't wait. That's interesting, actually. There's two in this particular request. I don't know why that is. Look into that, but it doesn't seem to affect it anyway. So product tool and then description when the caller confirms the product code. So I want to make sure that they confirm it first. I don't want it to run off and start to make a request in the middle of when it thinks that there's a product code. I want it to make sure the caller confirms the product code and then send it off. And this is what we look for in make product code. And we're looking for the validated product code. So they've confirmed it. It's a string. And that sends off. So that is this part. So that's it. It seems more complicated than it is. I think once you get your head around it and you start to play around with it for a bit and ask me a few questions if you have questions, you can make it work. Again, you don't need to do this necessarily with a monitor core controller URL. You can probably just use a tool call. I find this better. It's more flexible. You can do more with it. And this is how 100% how Vapi does their workflows using orchestration. Cool. Anyway, so that is how you do product number lookups using tool calls and injecting data in to a continuing workflow. Anyway, if you found this useful, then let me know. If you need more information about it, let me know. See ya.